Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We'll be specifically looking at collaborative project ecosystems and how you can be on the same page and execute your projects with Autodesk Construction Cloud. To just run through the agenda, there's a couple of introductions and things that I want to just put into context for you for today. Firstly, just a brief introduction around Baker Baines, also our Extraordinary Women in BIM winner, and then I'll briefly introduce you to the 15 BIM Insights reports, which I'll highlight during the course of today. With any of these types of webinars, I always like to just make sure that we are all on the same page regarding BIM and the common data environment. And then we're going to look at Autodesk Construction Cloud Solutions, or ACC. You'll hear me use the abbreviation, both how it applies to the design workflows and the design stages of a project, and also construction workflows. And at the end, we will allow for a couple of questions. I believe there is a Q&A box, so if any questions come up during the course of the webinar, feel free to go and pop them into the Q&A box. Then the good news for the South African attendees today, I believe you get 0.2 CPD points. Yes, I'm just checking to confirm. It does mean that you do need to attend the entire webinar, so stick around until the end. And then based on the attendance register, we'll make sure that you get the relevant information so that you can claim for your CPD points. And that is for both SACAP and EXA members. Firstly, just to start off, I wanted to just introduce you to Baker Baines. I'm aware of the fact that many of you may be familiar with us already, but in essence, there's three core aspects to our business. Firstly, from a consulting point of view, in our consulting space, there's a lot of work that we do around BIM consulting and data and document management implementation, and we always make sure to look at both people process and the business and technology side. Education is something that we're very passionate about. We were one of the first partners in South Africa to have a self-paced e-learning platform, and we do offer a variety of different types of training. Accredited ATC, partnered with Pinnacle series for self-paced e-learning, and specifically in the construction and collaborative project ecosystem, we do a fair amount of project-based training. And then last but certainly not least, we are partnered with well-renowned software brands like Autodesk, Naicker, ClearEdge, and a couple of others. And these specific service offerings and products and skill sets that we have span across both the building, civil, energy, process plant, and manufacturing spaces. Then I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm your host and presenter for today. My name is Yani Viljoen. I'm one of the directors at Baker Baines, and I manage the professional services team. I've done a variety of different things over the years and at Baker Baines, but mostly a big part that I'm very passionate about is being a little bit of a BIM consultant or BIM counselor, helping different stakeholders and disciplines collaborate on projects. I also head up and oversee most of the common data environment and BIM implementations in our organization, and I'm familiar with ISO 19650, which I'll tell you a little bit more about today. Then what I wanted to touch on today, and part of the introductions, and I'm very excited to share this with you, is about our Extraordinary Women in BIM competition. This is something that we hosted to celebrate females within this industry and specifically also to align with Women's Month. So I just wanted to share a brief clip with you as we introduce and announce our winner.
We did have a list of finalists, and they were very, very strong candidates. So when our judges were deliberating about the winner, we really had to drill down to the nitty-gritties and the details. However, I'm very pleased to let you know that Prinell, you are the 2024 Extraordinary Women.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so nervous. I am so anxious. You know, it was all these emotions. I'm not sure what would be the outcome to the panel. Thank you very much. this is this experience is going to be amazing. Never been out of the country as well, so yeah, you guys have given me a lot.
Unfortunately, you're all on mute, but I would have wish we could do a big applause for Prinell. We do also have her online with us, Prinell. If you wanted to, you could just turn on your camera and people can also see that you have joined us today.
We did have.
But so well done to the winner of our Extraordinary Women in BIM competition for 2024, Prinell Naicker. As you've seen, we've tried to kind of capture her reaction as we announce this. She is the winner of a all expenses paid trip to San Diego, USA, to go and attend the annual Autodesk University conference. A couple of the things that stood out for us, she is a structural design technologist at Bosch Holdings, but for us, I was one of the winners, as well as Anine from ACOM and Alma from DRA, was specifically around the leadership and the innovation within Bosch, how she really tried to optimize the different processes, the mentorship and the training, and how she did an excellent job at not just learning the theory and the practice around BIM, but also applying that to some of the projects that they were involved with. So well done, Prinell, and I'm very excited to be traveling to the US with you in just a couple of weeks. And for those of you on this call, for the females on this webinar today, look out for next year, as we will be running the competition again. And if you think that you could be the 2025 Extraordinary Women in BIM, definitely look out for that so that you can nominate yourself or ask a colleague to nominate you. Then something else that I just wanted to introduce before we get into the meat of today's webinar is the 15 Insights BIM for Now and the Future report. This report was put together by Baker Baines doing a workshop in collaboration with GIFA, and we had multiple different individuals attending this workshop from multiple different areas. Yes, predominantly in architectural services, but we did have some representation from real estate, interior, consulting, construction, project management, developers, and even public sector. And the idea of this workshop was to really have multiple different categories and elements from learning and development, project ecosystem collaboration, BIM standards and workflows, and then also technology, and really ask the industry, what do they think about e-learning platforms, about 3D coordination and so forth, and then categorize these in 4 different groups. So group 1 was for us to have a sense of what are some of the elements that the industry have already adopted within their organizations or on their projects, and they're seeing positive results. So the BIM for the now, what's happening already. What are some of the aspects that the attendees or the participants see a lot of value in, but they perhaps have not adopted it yet? So group 3, group 2, where are some of the things that you think, oh, that seems like a little bit of a hard work exercise, so I'm not exactly sure if it's so valuable. And then what I like to call the unicorn items, that this is really not BIM for now, this is something that we potentially get to in the future, would be the category of, there's probably unlikely or improbable that it will happen in the short term. So I'm just positioning this because the report is available. It's free to download on our transformation tool site. I will maybe ask one of my colleagues on this call to just pop that link in the chat box also so that you can go and access that. But I want to just position and provide some context around this report, because throughout today, there are some insights that I will be sharing with you. Now that we have our introductions out the way, let's start off and just make sure that we are all on the same page with what is BIM and what is a common data environment. That's CDE. You'll see a lot of abbreviations. So 63% of construction professionals use between 3 and 6 different applications. And I'm sure that you find this in your daily lives also. it gets a little bit messy and complicated when there are so many different aspects of technology. And this is not just, I'm not just talking about design. It goes from what are you designing on, what are you managing a project on, how are you controlling your cost, how are you sharing information? And then you take into account that that is within one organization, and projects typically have multiple different organizations and disciplines collaborating. So construction is a very, very collaborative environment because we do need to bring all of these different stakeholders together, but it ends up being quite fragmented because each individual or organization or discipline will have multiple different ways of communicating, of sharing information, and really the idea is to bring this together and make it easier for everyone to work together. Now, I'm sure that despite your best efforts, maybe even with this Teams call, you're attending this webinar, but you have multiple different other tabs open, and probably despite your best efforts, somewhere on your desktop, you have a folder structure that is similar to the image below. The average knowledge employer spends about 2 hours a day looking for information. Now, this is based on a IDC report and a McKinsey report. The one report found 1.8 hours, the other report found 2.5 hours. So we've kind of put the two reports together to average it out to 2 hours a day. And if you think about that, if you need to spend 2 hours a day finding information, you still need to double check if that information is correct, and it's something that takes a lot of your time. This is really where BIM comes into play. So chances are many of you are very familiar with this concept already, but I do want to make sure that we all understand it in the same way. I'm going to start off by just giving you the kind of textbook definition from the ISO 19650, and they define BIM as the use of a shared digital representation of a built asset, and then that is used to facilitate design, construction, and operation, and hopefully it forms a reliable basis for decision making. Now, this definition, whilst it's great, provides a lot of words, but it still may be difficult to understand, well, what is it really? I like to break BIM up, building information management or building information modeling, into 3 aspects. Number one, it is a working process. It's definitely not a piece of software on its own. It's not a physical item. It is a process or a way of going about things. And ideally, this process should be followed across the entire project lifecycle. Then I'm jumping to the far right-hand side. It is still about producing a virtual asset. So the virtual asset or the information model or the BIM model, and that is not just something in 3D. Ideally, it should include both your graphical models, which is the typical 3D, the documentation that you produce from those graphical models, and also the asset data. But as cliche as it may sound, it is all about information. You'll hear me say that often throughout our time together today. It is about making sure that the right people have the right information at the right time. So thinking about these 3 things, a better way of kind of framing BIM in terms of building information modeling is actually thinking about it as better information management, because at its core, it's a process, and you are using things like 3D models and asset data and documentation to help you manage the vast amounts of information that is shared on a project. Now, if we understand that it is about information management, there's 3 things that we need to take into consideration. Firstly is, how do we access the information? What level of detail do we need within the information? And now that we have the information available, what other types of things can we do? So think about this in terms of access. We're talking about the common data environment, things like file formats, structured data, and collaborative information sharing. When we think about the detail, we're talking about information requirements, really defining what information you need to perform your task. And then when we talk about the uses, we're thinking about what does technology enable? The simplest kind of explanation for this that I often use is you really can only do automated clash detection if you have 3D models. In other words, when we only had 2-dimensional information, we couldn't really do that. But now with technology and with additional information, we can start doing the 3D-based coordination. Now, you've heard me in the beginning give this is the ISO 19650 definition of BIM. I wanted to just touch briefly on BIM standards, specifically the ISO 19650 standard. So the ISO 19650 standard is a global standard for managing information. A lot of us kind of freely refer to it as the BIM standard. It is actually a standard for managing information across the entire project lifecycle of a built asset. So it refers to a built asset, not necessarily just a building. These standards were founded on the UK standards for managing information using BIM. And then unlike other standards, which are kind of like rules and regulations, this is an international standard of good practice. This standard, if you're looking and listening to this and thinking, it seems like something that's really not in South Africa yet. The SAN standard has 5 different parts, and part 1, part 2, and part 3, which talks about the concepts, the asset management, and the delivery phase of the project, has also been accepted by SANS and is available to purchase on the SABS website. So it is also actually SANS standards. You may find that some people refer to it as SANS 19650. Now, the reason why I positioned the standard and BIM is because I wanted to talk about a common data environment. A common data environment is one of the requirements that is set out in the ISO standard. And firstly, the common data environment is an environment, it's not an experience. And it's also not necessarily just one IT system. It can be multiple integrated IT systems. And then really the common data environment should be a single source of information that is used to collect, manage, and then disseminate those pieces of documentations. In other words, we're looking at tightly controlled processes for how things enter, move through, and then ultimately leave the system. And it is for graphical models and non-graphical data for the entire project team. And what I mean by that, it should not just be a place where your CAD files are shared or where your Revit models are uploaded. It is something that contractors, your subbies, architects, engineers, owners, property developers, project managers, QS, and so forth can use, and it can work and ideally should be implemented throughout the entire life cycle of the project. There are a couple of fundamental principles around a common data environment specific to the ISO 19650 standard, and those are the following. The idea is that information is produced once and you have the ability to reuse that information. That also talks about compatibility, and then that information goes through checks, reviews, and approvals. So as we move through the stages, information has to be approved by certain individuals or move through certain workflows. Also, your information should be continuously shared and trusted. And if I say continuously shared, frequently shared, not necessarily just the typical Friday model publishing. And when it comes to trusted is if you have the ability to know that the information is up to date and to know kind of what has changed and who last touched or changed this information, it makes it a lot easier for that information to be trusted. Then shared for suitability. I think commonly a lot of the challenges that we find on projects is that information is shared, but the suitability is not taken into account. This is only for information. This is only for the tenders. This is your construction, issued for construction documentation. Definitely controlled and secured permissions. Just because we're putting everything in a central platform doesn't mean that everyone has the same level of access and permission. And then the age-old problem of version control and version history. So if you are evaluating or considering implementing a common data environment, these are some of the things that you need to check. I do just want to highlight this, that there is a difference between a common data environment according to BIM guidelines, which kind of ticks all of those boxes that I've just mentioned before, and a data environment or a platform that is commonly used. Whilst Dropbox or Google Drive are great for what they are made for and are data environments or platforms that are commonly used, it wouldn't be a common data environment according to the BIM guidelines. Now, I've introduced myself and I've positioned the common data environment, but I do also just wanted to get a little bit of a sense of our audience today. And I wanted to just launch a poll, and the poll specifically just asking for some information around what are the common data environments that you use, or how do you typically share project information. I can see the poll, and I hope that you guys can too. There you go. I'm going to just ask my colleague to give me an indication around how we're tracking in terms of poll responses. Okay. Let me see. Let me get to know our audience. Oh, there you go. Great. Wonderful. So at the moment, we're looking at about 44%. Yeah, 44% Autodesk Construction Cloud or BIM 360. That's great. That means that there's a lot of you who have already implemented that. Couple saying other, some people SharePoint, and then some Dropbox and Google Drive. I'm going to give it another kind of like 20 seconds to get a couple of extra responses. I do also see a hand up. Based on the hand up, Lindy, if you don't mind, if there's a specific question, if you don't mind just dropping that in the chat box, and then either myself or someone from our team will get to that. Great. Thank you for that, everyone. Let's continue. Can still see my screen. We're good to go, mate? Wonderful. So I've mentioned to you that I wanted to share some things around the insights report. And one of the first things that I found, and it's related to the common data environment, is when we asked our participants in the workshop around a common data environment, this is what we found. 50% of the participants acknowledge the potential value of the common data environment, but they have not implemented it yet. 25% had already implemented common data environments with positive results, which indicates it is actually a BIM for now topic. It's not a BIM for the future. There were 25% who still said, well, it seems like a lot of effort and I'm not quite sure of the potential value it adds. But one of the things that stood out for us during these engagements is that there is still a bit of a lack of a comprehensive understanding of what a true common data environment does and how it fits into workflows and into your existing projects, and also which platforms and technologies would meet the BIM CDE requirements and which not. But good news, 75% of the participants can definitely see the value in a common data environment. So now we have the context of BIM, the context of information management, and the context of a common data environment. I wanted to introduce you to Autodesk Construction Cloud. For those, for the 40% have already used either Construction Cloud or BIM 360. So for those who are not familiar with that, Autodesk Construction Cloud is a platform that offers solutions for various different stages and workflows of a project. So from design to planning to building to operating. And it ticks all of those boxes as the ISO standard said in terms of what a common data environment should be able to do. It does far more than just a common data environment. So effectively, we like to say that Autodesk Construction Cloud is a common data environment plus, because it has some additional features and workflows. And it is underpinned by data and document management from models, drawings, images, cost items, photos, videos, and so forth. Now, within the Construction Cloud portfolio, there are different product entitlements or different applications, which I wanted to introduce to you. At the foundational level or at its core, it is Autodesk Docs. And Autodesk Docs, when you hear Docs, think document management. That is really where your document control sets, your document versioning, your document approvals, everything related to just managing your document environment. And this is the core of the CDE that we've mentioned before. Building on top of docs, there are multiple different solutions depending for your role and the phase that you're involved with on a project. So between BIM Collaborate, we're looking at, this is everything for your design collaboration and model coordination. It does extend into BIM Collaborate Pro for our Revit and Civil 3D and Plant 3D users. There's also a specific solution for takeoff, whether you're doing 2D or 3D takeoff. And then in terms of Autodesk Build, if you hear build, think building, or think about construction, because this really is the construction solution for project management, quality management, safety, cost, scheduling, and so forth. So I wanted to position the different product names because we are going into what are the aspects that you can use within the design stages and what are the aspects and features that you can use within construction. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by some of your comments here. Let's jump into this and start by looking at the workflow showcase for design. Now, we've put this into the kind of design category. Many of this and these features or workflows are just as valuable and useful within construction. First, let's look at docs in a little bit more detail. Like I've mentioned, this is the common data environment. This is where you can do your document control, revision workflows, transmittal, tracking, getting transfers between different projects, issue tracking, markup tools, revisions, and workflows. And really, it acts as a document repository. It does include the versioning and the revisioning and the backup, one of those key aspects of what ISO requires from a common data environment. And then also the reviewing, the approval, and the sharing. So that's the process of how things move through, and then it will exit or get published or archived within the system. The great thing about this is it supports many different file types. Now, what you are seeing in front of you, these are all of the viewable file formats. And if I say viewable, these are all of the file formats that you can view on the platform. It doesn't mean that these are the only file formats that you can share on the platform, but to give you an idea, some file formats you'll be able to see, but you may not be able to go and open and view it on the system. I think the best way to get a sense of what do I mean by the 2D and 3D viewing on the system is to have a little bit of a look at what this will look like. So when I'm talking about you can view it on the system, you can see here, this is done on the browser without necessarily having access to an AutoCAD or a Revit. These floor plans that have been shared, I can open, I can move around. I can also have a look at it in 3D to provide more context, overlay both the 2D and the 3D, and it gives quite nice visuals. So for those of you who are reviewing information, marking up, adding comments, but you're not necessarily a model author, this is a great way to view your information and contribute on the information. Then next up, document control. I mentioned that permissions and making sure that the right people have the right access is important. And within Autodesk Docs, you can manage your permission control. At the moment, we're just adding the project manager. That could be just a role or an individual's name, and we're giving them manage permission over a specific folder. But you can go and do either manage permissions, or you can only view, you can only download, you can only upload. Permission settings can be set for multiple different things within the system. So it makes it easier to know that the right information ends up with the right people. Then we've spoken about all of these workflows and checks and reviews. There's different ways that you can start incorporating things like issues and markups to do your design review. Now, in this scenario, I can go ahead and open the floor plan, and perhaps I'm reviewing this floor plan. So I've created a little bit of markup and also created an issue. So this is an owner request for a change, most likely, but you can see in this request, there's multiple different aspects. It could be design, general, safety. It is pinpointed to the drawing, and you can add things, the due date, the description, the references, and so forth. Now, when we're talking about approvals, if you've made some issues or perhaps some markups, there's a formal workflow for getting documents approved. And if I'm saying documents, you can see we're talking Word, Excel, PowerPoint, AutoCAD, and so forth. So in this scenario, I'm notifying my reviewers that I'm submitting something to them. This could be a one-step process, a two-step process, or a very complicated multiple check process. These individuals, so John and Leah, will get an email notification so that they can go and review and approve the documents that we have shared with them. Next, this is something that I'm a very big fan of, and it's nice because I understand that not everyone on this call is necessarily in the architecture or building space or Revit users, but in this scenario, we're looking at, well, there's a version 1 and a version 2, and we're actually looking at some civil 3D or civil information here, and we can go and compare what is the difference between version 1 and version 2. So if we consider this row design, we can see how it has changed between version 1 and version 2 by doing our little drag, and we can also see how the changes are displaying in the long section. So definitely not just something for the architects and the MEP engineers, but also for the civil engineers and other types of projects. So like I've said, we can do a side-by-side where one is in blue and one is in red, or have the scroll bar. This is particularly useful, the viewing, you'll see it again, the feature popping up in the next session, but it's specifically useful if people are sharing new versions with you, and if we're talking big models, lots of things, or what has actually changed, or if something happened and you needed to revert back to an older version, you can get that comparison. So just to summarize Docs, and remember it's the foundation, everything else that I'm going to show you is built on top of Docs. Here we can do document approvals, we can do our document control in terms of making sure that the correct information is with the correct people at the correct time. We can collaborate on documentation. It ties in with Microsoft 365 for other types of information. Send your transmittals, view it online. It integrates with many different 2D and 3D design applications. Then, if you are a subscriber to the Architecture, Engineering, and Construction collection, this is the collection that includes your Revit, AutoCAD, Civil 3D, Navisworks, and so forth. Maybe you're aware of this, maybe you're not, but Autodesk Docs is included in your AEC collection. So if you're an AEC collection subscriber, you already have access to Autodesk Docs too. Then just another insight from our report, which is specific about open information sharing. And when you consider that information sharing is at the core of BIM, what we found from our report, and this is insight 9 from our 15 insights report, is that 50% of the participants still think that it's a little bit risky and they're unsure about the value that open information sharing has for projects. Luckily, 25% can acknowledge that it is beneficial, but they haven't necessarily implemented yet. And then 25% said that it's probably quite unlikely. But open information sharing, which is something that's not currently embraced, at least by the participants that we have here, indicated that a lot of individuals are quite concerned that the information could end up in the wrong hands, or they're not sure how their IP is protected. For me, what stood out about this, and it ties in with the other insights around what a common data environment really is. We've spoken about permission, and we've spoken about making sure that the correct information is with the correct people. So open information sharing, in theory, should be a lot easier within a common data environment because of all of the permission settings and control aspects that you have around who gets to do what with your information. Next, I wanted to introduce you to BIM Collaborate, or then BIM Collaborate Pro. Again, this is built on top of Docs, so everything that I've covered so far will be a part of BIM Collaborate. Now, BIM Collaborate is really where we start doing our design collaboration and model coordination. So we can aggregate all of our different models to view a federated model. We can still work with issues. This is where we can do our automatic clash detection and also some reporting and meeting management. And if you are a Revit user, this is really where you can co-author your Revit models on the cloud. So effectively, Revit work sharing on the cloud. Now, depending on your role, there's different things that you may need to do. If you are a design author, this is the work anywhere, anytime. You don't necessarily need to be in the office to get access to the server, to get access to your central model. You can do this anywhere, anytime. If you are more perhaps in a BIM manager or the project architect or a project manager, you can get a very good sense of what is happening on the project, reviewing how people are sharing information, where's the models, perhaps where there are some bottlenecks. And then from a decision maker point of view, you can oversee this the process of designing and coordination, share some feedback, get insights, and then also provide some advice in terms of the big core coordination challenges that you may have. Let's look at this a little bit more in detail, because one of the big things that I always find is that people say, but if I put my central model on the cloud, I don't want everyone to see it all the time. Now, this is where the setup becomes important and you can create teams. So what you'll see here is I'm creating an architecture team and I'm mapping that to an existing folder, and then also structure. For ease of demonstration, we've just grouped MEP into one bucket. Technically, there'll probably be perhaps 3 or maybe even 4 different consultants, and map that to the folder. So the reason why we're setting up these teams is if you are in the structure team, your day-to-day kind of like syncing to central work sharing is only visible to your team until you decide to share it with the other disciplines. And again, here we can manage permissions. So we're managing the permissions of the MEP team, and whilst Philippe can manage everything, we may decide that Brandon can only view or only create or only edit, but not do anything and everything that he wants with the information. Again, just another level of permission to make sure that everyone is doing with the information what they are allowed to, and that they have visibility and access to what they should have. So now that we've got our team set up, you can see that within the design collaboration space, we have these swim lanes, and these swim lanes allow us to get a sense of how information is being shared. Now, structure have worked within their team, but it is now time. It's the typical Friday afternoon. It is now time to share their information with the rest of the consultants. So they are creating a package, and within that package, we're not just talking about the Revit model. Within this package, we are including model, drawing, supporting documentation, which could be in a variety of different file formats. And you'll note that on the swim lane that icon has now changed, so it's easy for everyone to get visibility of when there's been information shared. If I'm the architect, I see that, oh, there's a new structural package that's being shared, and I have the ability to decide if I want to go and consume that. Now, if I'm consuming that, if you are familiar with Revit, you typically have links from other disciplines, and usually it's a big upload, download, update process. But in this scenario, if you consume it, it updates the link within your model. And here we can see I can open up again in the browser and look at that federated model with both the architecture and the structure. So you have the ability to, when you receive new information from other disciplines, review it before you bring it into your model. Same thing if you are sharing information with them. It really reduces the upload download, and you get one nice view of all of the models and documents that's being shared, where you perhaps have missed something, where you have not consumed something because there were maybe some issues with what was being shared. So just to talk about sharing those design changes, again, we can see here that there's an icon from the architectural team, and that means that there is a package that has been shared, or I can go and create a new package. So again, think of your typical Friday afternoon model publishing. I'm creating a new package and I'm following best practice. I'm actually telling people what has changed in this model, but I know that that's not always the case. So if you do receive a new model, you do have the ability to go to your change visualization and actually see what is the difference between the previous version and the new version. And in this case, it'll show you added, remove, or modified. In this scenario, we can see that the wall has moved slightly, but imagine you are coordinating, you are the mechanical engineer, and you get these new versions every Friday, and you don't know, did they just upload because it was Friday, or were there changes? The ability to go, show me the changes, and you can visually see that what has been added, removed, or modified. It makes it so much easier for you to know where you need to start in terms of your coordination, or where you need to focus. Also makes it a lot easier to see when someone said they updated something and perhaps they haven't. Now that we've got all of our models, let's think about the coordination. Again, similar to how you can set up teams, you can set up coordination spaces. And in this case, we're doing MEP versus structure. Again, I know it would most likely be mechanical, electrical, wet services, fire protection. We've grouped them together. So we've created our coordination space, and I can go to clashes. Now, what you're seeing in front of you, as soon as the coordination space is also updated, is live. So you get a live view of all of the clashes. I've selected something specific. We're looking at steel detailing and our mechanical ducting and those clashes. While some of these may be approved as penetrations, others could potentially be a real clash, and I can go and create that issue. I can assign that issue to the specific role or individual who needs to go and address it, also give them a start and a due date. They will get notified about that, and I can also track everything that has been assigned and everything that has been closed out with all of these due dates. Makes it so much easier to manage and stay on top of your coordination. Regarding the issue management, you may say, sure, Yanni, it's easy when there's 44 clashes, but what do you do when there's 5,000 clashes and some of them are false clashes and we need to manage all of these? Again, you can pinpoint it. You'll note under description, it actually also gives you the IDs. And there's an add-on for issues if you are a Revit user, which makes it easy to say, okay, here I can see my 2 issues. I've got my model open and it shows those issues for me within my model. So within my model, I can go and update that, and I can go and update the status. So here we can see that Oliver has changed one of those to in review. If you are a Navisworks user, it doesn't mean that Navisworks sits outside of this process. Navisworks can very much be incorporated into this process because, again, you can manage your issues on BIM Collaborate by changing and updating things in Navisworks as well. So as soon as someone uploads a new model, if we had 44 clashes between structures and mechanical, and I've now changed these 2 things, as soon as we update that, we'll have a live view of the clashes. So we don't have to wait for the coordination meeting to get a sense of what's all going on. We can continuously view that, and as we make our design updates, our coordination will update as well, and then keep track with our issues and assignments. Another quick insight that I wanted to share with you today was Insight 12, specifically around design collaboration and model coordination. And 40% of the participants indicated that they have already implemented or adopted this within their organizations, and they're seeing positive results. I'm specifically talking about 3D-based design collaboration and model coordination like Navisworks and BIM Collaborate Pro. There's about 20% that acknowledge the potential value but have not implemented or adopted it yet. And then there were 20% that were unsure of the potential value that it adds when you think about is the juice worth the squeeze. A lot of this we also find within the answers are based on different people's perceptions of what we mean when we say design collaboration and model coordination. That gives us a little bit of an idea of the types of features and tools that we can use to work better in collaborating in terms of the entire project ecosystem for the design stages. But let's have a look at what happens in construction and specifically what you can do with Autodesk Build. Now, you've seen within the ACC entire platform, there are things for model coordination. We haven't really touched in detail around the takeoff aspect, but we're going to also look at what we can do with our safety, quality, project management, cost estimating, and so forth. If we visualize this just slightly different, remember how I said that Docs really is at the core of Autodesk Construction Cloud, and then built on top of that are BIM Collaborate Pro, Takeoff, and Build. Docs, like we've said, this really is the common data environment or the document management system. Within BIM Collaborate and Takeoff, this is where we establish both internal and external collaboration processes. And then Build is where we start to connect the design team to everyone in the field. And let's be real, this is typically where the pawpaw hits the fan when it comes to construction challenges and when people work together, because it's far easier to resolve a problem when we're still just in the virtual world. It becomes costly and complicated to fix issues when we're already in the physical world. So Autodesk Build, I've mentioned that project management, but what I'm really saying here is we're talking about things like your RFIs, transmittals, submittals, so submittals being workshop drawing approvals, things like spec approvals, meeting management, again, issue tracking, tying it into the program, getting a sense of what's happening with our assets. Have they been ordered? Have they been installed? Have they been delivered? And also staying on top of all of your inspections, your safety, your quality, your snagging, and how that relates to the cost and budgeting of the project. First, let's look at RFIs. Now, within the Build environment, again, built on top of Docs, so you'll find that there are similarities in terms of files. The files that you see in the homepage here is the same as the files from Docs. But when we look at RFIs, again, everything is about permissions. You don't want just anyone to necessarily submit an RFI, but you definitely don't want anyone to review it. So in this scenario, we've put David as a reviewer. There are different types of workflows. You could have something more simplified with just one reviewer or multiple reviewer, and lots of customization. So if you wanted to create a custom field where perhaps you show what affected trades do we have by this RFI, or what's the priority, or what's the cost impact, so many different things. When I create an RFI, there's a numbering system, and I can go and assign that to the next person in the workflow, give them a question and a suggested answer, but everything is referenced and linked. So I can again go and link that back to a drawing. I can go and add individuals to be watchers or effectively copied in this communication. And then that will move to the next step, which in this case is David. So David needs to review these office dimensions. And if he has reviewed it, we can close and distribute. But we know that sometimes you want to just reply to an email and give your answer to the RFI. It is incorporated to your email. So when you get the notification, you can respond via email and it will capture that. Or what if it's an RFI that you need to assign to someone who's not an active participant on this project, but you kind of need once-off input from them? You can add non-members as well and link multiple RFIs to one another. In this case, we're talking about the dimensions for one of the stalls to meet some requirements. When I say references, you can add things like issues, potential change orders to RFIs, other RFIs, as well as documents. So all of the different aspects on the project are interlinked. And we know that most of the times, some of these RFIs actually start on site. So you can also go and do it on your mobile device and log the RFI then and there, and also perhaps add a photo of what you're seeing in front of you or what you want to ask or raise the RFI, what you want to ask the question about. Then if you are a build user, maybe you're aware of this, it is one of the, I'm saying newer, it's probably been around for more than a year, but less adopted, is the ability to also incorporate your schedule or your program. Now, this is not where you create your program, this is not where you necessarily manage it, but it does provide a way so that there's visibility around the program or the schedule, and that there's better tracking in terms of how all of the things on your construction project has an impact on your program. Again, permissions, everything within the system, and anything within a decent common data environment should have your permission settings. But we can see here, I've uploaded my, this is actually from Microsoft Projects, and there's multiple different ways that I can view it. Just show me the Gantt, show me the list and the Gantt chart. You can start filtering it to get a sense of perhaps I only want to see critical, only things related to labor for construction, change whether I'm looking at it yearly, quarterly, monthly, to get a different view of what we have within this program. You can configure or basically turn on and off, whether it's resources, baseline programs, your dependencies, and so forth, and then see the start and the finish with the completion. So in this scenario, there's both a successor and a predecessor for this specific task. And I can go and assign things to this or reference things. So in this scenario, I'm actually adding an issue to what is in my program. And this is just making Bill aware that, listen, there's a couple of issues on this, and chances are we may need to adapt the program. And in this scenario, I'm suggesting a change that will have both a delay and possibly a cost impact. And Bill can go and review this and say either it's mitigated or it is allowed. If it is allowed, he will then go and update the program and upload the new version, and you'll see here that it's changed. So it gives you the ability to see, again, also on mobile device, where your RFI submittals, any kind of delays or bottlenecks had an impact on your schedule. And it ties all of these different workflows from a construction point of view together, so that you don't have all of my RFI sit here, but all of my problems sit here. Everything is in one collaborative environment. When we talk quality and safety now, there's a lot of you on this call. I don't really have a sense of everyone's roles and backgrounds, but what I'm showing you around, let me go one back. I got too excited about the forms here. When we talk about forms, it can be used for such a wide variety of different things because you can create templates. So the templates can be built by either uploading a smart PDF, which means you're using something that you're already familiar with, or by creating your own, and again, have multiple contributors. There's so much permissions and customization around you want to set this up. In this case, it's quite a simple example just of a quality checklist that needs to be performed by the foreman and also signed off. You'll see that it incorporates an actual signature, and it can be exported to a PDF. So in this case, this was a good check. Everything had a pass. But with the forms, you can attach for this hauling equipment checklist. You can attach different forms to one another, but also add the references, add the issues and the photos. So this is perhaps a different example. So pre-haul inspection, and we can see, okay, is the truck bed clean and smooth? No, it is not. Whilst I'm doing this, I can immediately create the issue to go, this is actually a fail. Let's go and add the reference, assign this to someone. So imagine doing this in the field. Imagine you doing your snagging and you're working around with your mobile and you say, oh, this is not done. It sends the notification. And you have the activity list of who signed off at which point. These forms isn't necessarily just by one person. You can add documents, you can add photos, you can add signatures, and you can add assignee changes. So you can have multiple people saying, Yanni needs to check this and this before Amanda needs to check before Prinell gets to sign off, as an example. Again, things like different types of issues can be created if you want specific types of issues to track things in your inspections, or perhaps specific root causes if you wanted to start doing some root cause analysis. These issues and photos can be linked to your forms. So in this scenario, maybe we have a quality issue. I can pinpoint it on my drawing. So there's no confusion around which office has the incorrect flooring installed, or where is office 103. It is pinpointed on the drawing, and I can go and assign that on the spot to the person who needs to update that, and they will get the email notification. Also makes it great for tracking how you've assigned these things and how they've changed and how they were ultimately approved, and hopefully everything sorted at the end of the day. Then I wanted to touch on project meetings, and this is actually something that is available both within BIM Collaborate and BIM Collaborate Pro. But it is a great way to, if we have everything in a single system, let's have our project meetings in the same system as well. So here I've created an agenda. Most of the meetings at some point will probably go back to face-to-face, but there's a fair amount of Teams meetings still happening. And using, similar to how you would type out your agenda in Word, you'll have all of your different text fields, you create your agenda, but now you can assign these items then and there to someone. So when we're sitting in the meeting, we can go, broken handrail. This is a very simple example, but I've assigned this to someone. It is still open. Barbara, you have until the 11th to go and fix this. I've picked all of the attendees, and I've created my follow-up meeting. And within my follow-up meeting, the things that were not closed out in the previous meeting will carry over, and I have a record of all of the items and actions from my meeting. So no more waiting 2 weeks for minute meetings to be sent out. You really can capture everything whilst you're running the meeting, specifically useful for coordination meetings as well. Whilst you're in the meeting, assign those tasks, get those due dates, add those references. We are talking about this document. We're talking within reference to these RFIs, with reference to this design. And again, make sure that it is visible and that the correct people have the correct permissions to manage your projects. Then submittals, you've heard me say before that submittals really is anything that needs to be submitted in terms of product information, shop drawings, specs, and so forth, that needs to go through an approval process of sorts. So in this scenario, we're looking specifically at certificates for our fire safety equipment, and I'm assigning Paul's the contractor who needs to provide us with this information. So you'll see it says it's blue, it says we're waiting for submission. So the Alpha plumbers in this case will then update the information that they have been asked to share, and that will go to a review by United Construction in this example. And they can add additional reviewers if they needed to. Perhaps it's something to go, actually, Mr. Architect, you need to check that the Sandway specs are correct. If there's comments that you want to make, you can go and make this within the drawing. And here we're kind of adding a stamp to go, yes, happy days, these certificates or these specs are approved, and add in a comment if you needed to. Once this is done, this can then be closed and distributed. And upon close and distribute, there's a track record of the specific product information, how it's moved through the stages, and who it's been approved for. This is also very useful for whoever is going to manage this facility at the end of the day, because they have all of their product details, whether it's the manuals or the warranties or the specifications, in one central place, and they can see where and how it's been approved, and if it was perhaps referenced or linked to any other aspects on the project. Maybe it was an RFI. Then specifically when it comes to kind of like managing and paying it forward to whoever needs to manage that facility afterwards, or getting a better sense of what's happening in construction, is you do have the ability to also go and manage your assets, but map these assets with your BIM model or your information model. So if we think about an information model as it has the 3D detail or the graphical model, but it also has the asset data. In this scenario, we can say we're using an Omniclass classification system, and within Revit, please map these specific elements to these specific property fields. So when you run this extraction, it will go and look at the model that has been shared to match up those qualities. When you've got that within assets, we can start tracking and visualize these assets within 3D. So in this scenario, we're looking at some transformers on the Seapoint Civic project. We can see this in 3D. Now, whilst it's just represented as a box, we have all of the asset data that provides us the detail for that specific asset. And from an asset management point of view, we can also go and assign different settings or track that asset, whether the asset has been installed, whether it has been delivered, if it's been commissioned, where's the spec sheet for that? Imagine we were looking at fire extinguisher, where's the spec sheets, all the certificates that goes with that specific piece of equipment or asset. Then we're coming close to an end in terms of the specific build functionality, but what's the point of having all of this information if there isn't a great way that you can also do a bit of an as-built export? So within Autodesk Build, you do have the ability to do an as-built export. And with your as-built export, you can choose what you need. You can see that there's one that's been done quite recently, but we can go and create our as-built export and select what we want included in this. Now, typically what you'll find is it really is just kind of like design documentation and everything that has been approved, but not necessarily the specific approval process. So in this scenario, we're selecting sheets or our drawings, and then also give me all submittals and all RFIs. That's great just from a backup point of view to have that information safe, or if the client or the owner isn't actively on Construction Cloud, at least you can share this export from an as-built with them. And here's the history of all of our different drawings with the markups and the comments and the RFIs and the submittals, so that you have that information for the future. Now, I've spoken about a lot of things and mentioned how, oh, here's extra information, and these things can be related, and these things can be assigned to people or tracked. But the data really only becomes super, super useful when you can start to visualize and report and make actionable decisions based on all of the information that is available. That is where the reporting and the dashboarding comes in. So this just gives you an idea of kind of the homepage of Build. If you have imported an accurate location, we'll pick up things like the site weather. I can see my recent activity on my homepage, get a sense of my work that I need to do, see how up to date my mobile device is with syncing, also get the same information on my mobile device. It's available for iOS and Android, but the dashboards are really useful. We're creating a new dashboard for commissioning. And in this scenario, again, sharing permission settings and configuring this dashboard. I'm choosing what I want to see. I want to see some partner cards. So maybe you are open space user or Planoly or Power BI. Adding additional partner cards makes it better and easier to visualize the data. And if you can visualize the data better, you can understand it better and make some decisions. So this is actually an executive overview, not just of one project, but of multiple projects. So if I have a look at this, I can go and change. In this scenario, they're only looking at certain regions and maybe say, only show me some facilities. And I can see where we are higher risk items. So those higher risk items would be things like plenty of outstanding RFIs or submittals and so forth. So multiple different ways of reporting on the information. One of the best things that we find is just setting up the report, automating that so that it sends you an email. So the day before your site meeting or the day before your coordination meeting, you'll automatically get an email of a report with perhaps all of the open and outstanding RFIs or coordination issues. I can most likely go on talking about Build for days because, in fact, that's That's what I do when we do the training for this. But what I did want to highlight is another one of our insights from our BIM report, specifically asking about the application of BIM technology. And this was around mobile field apps. It was quite surprising to me. 60% have already adopted mobile field apps for construction. So the fact that no one's going to take their phone and, there's no way that we'll see people with tablets on site is clearly not true. It is a BIM for the now aspect. And then 40% of individuals see the value in using mobile apps to help connect the office to the field. So 100% of all of the participants for our report basically indicated that one of the BIM for now things are the fact that we're seeing more and more different apps and mobile access specifically to make construction management and going out to site a lot easier. Then I've mentioned this in the beginning, but I think it's very important because it kind of brings all of this information and data together within Autodesk Docs, within Autodesk Construction Cloud is Bridge. What often happens, and for the 40% earlier on that said you are already using Construction Cloud or BIM 360, you may have experienced this, is that different people host projects, which also mean that ultimately different people may have different hosting and permission rights to information. This is where Bridge is really, really useful because Bridge allows you to bridge information between different projects. Now, it could be the same project, that is, the architects are hosting it and running with all of the coordination, and then from construction phase onwards, perhaps the client is hosting it or the PMs are hosting it, but we want to still have our platforms talk together and that the information is updated. Remember in the beginning when I spoke about a common data environment, and I said that a common data environment is not just a single application. It can be multiple sources, but making sure that it is integrated and automated is what makes it a common data environment. So with Bridge, you can share sheets, files, folders across different projects and across different teams. You can set up those automations. In other words, on this project, if something happens in folder A, please also put that on this project in folder A. This really allows a couple of times. It saves some of the repetitive work. Maybe you are using, like I said, you've got your document management here, but then someone else has invited you to do coordination on their hub. You can link that. It enhances the collaboration. It reduces the scenario where some people are fighting around where are we hosting it. And it really improves the data ownership and control within the construction cloud environment. To summarize and to just bring it in, that remember that Autodesk Docs is the foundation. It's at the core of Autodesk Construction Cloud, and this is where all of our document control, versioning, and approvals sit. And then built on top of that is BIM Collaborate, our design collaboration, issue management, model aggregation, and clash detection. You can extend that to BIM Collaborate Pro if you also want your Revit Cloud work sharing. 2D and 3D takeoff within Autodesk Takeoff, and then the project management, construction management, quality, safety, scheduling, assets. They've actually also added correspondence, which I haven't really mentioned today, but so that your correspondence can also tie into the system, both within BIM Collaborate and in Autodesk Build. Now, when we think about a common data environment, and I said it is not just one system, it can be multiple integrated system. The thing that makes Autodesk Construction Cloud such a great kind of first choice for common data environment is because there's more than 275 different partners that's connected to the Autodesk construction software. So those were some of the partner cards that you may have seen. There is 400 plus integrations available with Autodesk construction software. And then it does actually, through the Autodesk platform, it's got an open API. So in terms of customization and other integrations, it is limitless. Obviously, there's some skill and resources needed for that. But if you wanted it to integrate with your ERP system, or if you wanted this information to integrate, there's nothing is impossible in this world. Just to kind of give you a holistic view of where this fits in, I'm assuming that on this call, we may have a fair amount of Revit or AutoCAD or maybe even Civil 3D users. So there's multiple different applications from a design authoring side within the Autodesk ecosystem. Then we've spoken about BIM Collaborate Pro, Build, Takeoff, and Docs. If you want to extend that even further, Autodesk does also have a system that ties into the digital twinning space, in specific around Autodesk Tandem, when you can actually have your real world and what's happening in your digital space run in tandem. I've mentioned to you that there are multiple different integrations available. Here you are. So with Autodesk Construction Cloud Connect, there's connections. Basically, these applications have also opened up their API, and through a simple recipe integration, you can attach it to different administrative platforms, safety platforms, things like SharePoint if you wanted to, project management platforms, reality capture platforms. So a lot of different integrations available. The last insight which I'd like to share with you is specific around implementing BIM for the future and ISO 19650 or SANS 19650, which I introduced in the beginning of this webinar. So we have this in the beginning, and I'm using this to just bring us to the end today, is that 60% saw the potential value of implementing ISO 19650, but they have not done so yet. And when we asked why, kind of what stopped you so far, a couple of the things that stood out is that most needed to identify the barriers of this first and get a better sense of, well, what's going to work, what's not going to work. Many of the participants were not really well informed about the details of this information management standard, but the biggest thing is most individuals didn't really know where to start. Now, I'm here today to say to you, if you want to start implementing or if you want to start following the guidelines of ISO 19650, a common data environment is the best and easiest way to start, because it's something that is in line with the ISO. It's something that is very beneficial, and it's something that's fairly, it's fairly common. So if you're looking at this ISO standard and going, I'm not sure where to even start or to begin, get an understanding of a common data environment and the checks, reviews, and approvals of information. So lastly, I leave you with this. If you're not embracing digital transformation, your competitors will. This is not my own quote. This is actually a quote by a gentleman called Zohar from Flex Manufacturing and Design Solutions. But it really resonates with me because it's such a true quote. And I remember when we spoke about Revit years and years ago, everyone thought, we'll get to it. And now if you come across a firm who's still 2D only, they're playing catch up. So if you're not embracing digital transformation, your competitors will. I do, however, before we close, just wanted to get a sense of how can we help you? From a Baker Bain's point of view, our mission is really to solve our customer problems through digital transformation so that we can help you design and make a better world. But I wanted to just ask my colleague Amanda, thank you, to just launch that poll so that we can get a sense of how can we help you. I will go and open my chat box so that I can see what's happening on this poll. We've only provided you 3 options. If there's other ways that we can help you, please feel free to let us know. I'd like more information about Autodesk Construction Cloud, want to kind of see a demo or ask some questions or get some one-on-one time, and then nothing. I look forward to the ebook. So I'm very happy if you say that too, because we've put a lot of effort into putting together the BIM Insights report. What you'll find on transformation tools is we do also have an ebook around the uncomplicated guide to a common data environment. So if you're interested in a common data environment, would definitely suggest that you have a look at that ebook too. It is free, so by all means. Can we have an option for getting ISO compliant, please? I'm noting that it wasn't in the three options there. Right. So at the moment, most of you are looking forward to the ebook. I'm hoping that that's because we did a good job briefly explaining the construction cloud solution. Some looking for more information and some wanting to get a little bit more of a detailed demo. If you're interested in this, I would recommend requesting a detailed demo, because in that scenario, we can actually better understand your business and how you work to show you the things that would apply to your role or your projects. Then we'll get to questions and answers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. I do appreciate that you've spent your Friday afternoon with us, and I hope, unlike that first image, that you didn't have 17 different tabs open whilst you were attending that webinar. I'm going to go to my Q&A box, where I have nothing, but I do have some things in the chat box, so let me run through that. I know that we had a question around in terms of how can we help you getting ISO compliant. I've noted that. Then I wanted to just look at a couple of other comments and questions here. It said that ACC experience is rather dependent on the buy-in of the employer. Yes, this is one of those scenarios where it is ideal if the employer or the developer invests in Construction Cloud or invests in the common data environment, because ultimately it almost holds the most value for them. But we have definitely, only recently have we actually seen more the developers and the clients and owners investing in it. It's mostly been amongst the professional team, and it's mostly been because the professional team see the value in collaborating in that way, regardless of what is necessarily asked by them. I had this conversation with one of our clients at a dinner we had last night ago. The ideal is that on a project, you get people to be an active part of managing information, not because they're told to, but because they want to. And you'll only find that if they understand how it's beneficial for them. Let me just also see, is it possible to custom name the roles? Yes, you can customize the roles within Autodesk Construction Cloud. So the majority of all permission settings are controlled by either the individual's name. So I could either give Yanni access to something, or I could give Baker Baines access to something, or I could give the role of BIM consultant or Autodesk partner access to something, and you can create your own roles. If a company decides to suspend subscribing, how long does Autodesk keep their hub and their data? So if you have 0 subscriptions to the project and no one else on the project from other organizations have any subscriptions to the project, I believe that you have 30 days access to your data. But typically what we find is that it's not a scenario where you kind of need to continuously have 20 people with subscriptions. If a project has been completed, only one subscription can be the lowest, I was going to say lowest value subscription needs to stay active for someone to have access to that information. But remember, the subscriptions are not based on projects. You can have one old project, but then, you know, there's multiple different new ones. And then something that is worth mentioning, that there is no data limit or storage limits on Autodesk Construction Cloud. So unlike other common data environments or, you know, things like a Dropbox where you kind of run out of storage, unlimited projects, unlimited storage. Great. I don't see any other questions. If you do have any other questions, or if you wanted to reach out to me or to anyone from my team, please feel free to do so. I will make sure that you have all of our contact details. I'll pop that in the chat box. But for today, and I'm very impressed with myself because usually I don't stick to my time limits because I speak far too much. But thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you found this insightful. I hope that there's something that you can take away from today's webinar, and I definitely hope to see you with some of our engagements in the future.